What is up, Brad fans? Welcome to the show, and you know the drill. You know what I'm going to ask you to do. Rate, subscribe, follow, comment, all that good stuff that helps this show grow. This show that you love so much helps it grow, helps it get to more people who could also then love it as much as you. So, help us out. Do your part. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, at 2BradForYou, at BVanParadon. Either of those. Drop a line, question, comment, anything like that. Send me a voice recording with a question or a comment. I will play it if it's cool enough to get on the show. You know? There you go. You have a window to participate. Also, our website, 2bradforyou.wordpress.com, has a comment form. So those are your options. 2brad4you, at bvanparadon on the socials, or the website, 2bradforyou.wordpress.com. Enough of that. Today, we are breaking from the natural sciences we normally focus on to my second passion, the political sciences. And as always, for these 2 Brad for Politics episodes, as we're calling them, I am joined by my good friends back in Alberta, back in Canada, Scott, Coleman, and normally Steve would join us for these, but he was unavailable, so it was just the three of us. And we caught up talking about the summer in Canadian politics, the WE scandal, how that left Justin Trudeau and the Liberals feeling their position moving into a throne speech. We also talked about the new Conservative leader, Erin O'Toole. The Conservative Party had their leadership race election over the summer. So we talked about those things, how that positions the two parties with this now throne speech that was delivered on September 23rd. For those outside of Canada, the throne speech is basically the government saying this is the priorities for the next term, whatever you want to call it, session of Parliament. And it's the first chance that the opposition parties have to vote against the government. And we do have a minority government in Canada, so if they decided they could trigger an election, they did not do that. But we talked a little bit about what was in the throne speech, what would be the tactics moving forward for some of these parties in light of new leadership, etc. Then, of course, we had to touch on the news of the century, the news of the hour, the news that changes by the minute. The U.S. situation, we'll be polite and call it a situation and not an absolute dumpster fire. But after that debate, it looks even more like an absolute dumpster fire. And we recorded this on Saturday, October 3rd. I feel the need to say that because, my God, the news is changing so fast. So we had just got the notification of Donald Trump's positive diagnosis with COVID. We were speculating throughout the episode whether he was going to live or not. Maybe it's a little callous, but for a man that's so callous, I don't feel too much sympathy. Yeah, so I felt the need to bring that up because the situation is just changing so fast. There is just too much news around it. But we had a good time talking about it, what the diagnosis means for the election in our humble opinions, and just kind of, gaming through some of these scenarios of like what is going to happen. How worried should we be about this, about the fall of democracy in the US, things like that. And this is surprisingly where our opinions diverged a little bit. Anywho, if you like politics, if you're a political junkie like we are, I hope you enjoy this conversation. Like I said, as always, reach out to us, let us know what you think, or leave a comment and let us know what you think there. And that's enough from me. Here we go, 2 Brad for Politics, episode 3 with my good friends Coleman Wilkinson, Scott Stoley. Enjoy. Now we're back with the panel of regular, ordinary, workabout guys, aka the constituents, the people, the voters, the ones whose opinions matter. Correct. We have Scott Stoley back with us in Calgary. Scott, how's it going?
You can say proles, Brad. It's fine. But yeah, doing well. Thanks for having me.
All right, and representing the frigid, frozen north, Coleman in Edmonton, aka Lionel Steele.
Follow on Instagram.
That's right. Well, and get in touch if you want to be a part of Coleman's new business of making photoshopped avatars for your fantasy football teams.
Not just fantasy football, really any sport I can make work. It's great to be back on the podcast, and I always like how you never try and oversell my qualifications when we're entering this. It's
Can't
like this
stress
is a
enough. Regular, ordinary,
mm,
mediocre,
n-
average at best.
nothing particularly noteworthy about these motherfuckers. They're gonna talk about politics from the dirt level.
Dude, I'm trying to distinguish us from, the media elites, the mainstream, the lamestream media, the political punditry class. We're the ones who vote. We're the ones whose opinions matter, correct? Right?
I should put an asterisk on that. I've never actually voted in any election at any level. I've always been so busy.
Mm.
Well, this year, this coming municipal round, you should have plenty of time, no?
Oh, thank God we staved off a federal election coming up here. I was worried I was going to have to take time out of my busy unemployment schedule to vote.
Well, and it appears that we did avoid the election. That is the Canadian federal election, snap election. So let's start there because we all want to get to the massive tire fire burning on the southern border of Canada. We'll save that for the end because if we started with that, any problems that we have with Canadian politics would just seem like insignificant in comparison. But let's start with the busy. Well, we haven't talked in a while, so we'll go back a little bit to the summertime. Normally supposed to be a quiet time in politics. We had the corona crisis, of course. Everybody's dealing with that. But then we had a massive scandal in Canadian terms, the WE scandal. For the folks that may not know what this is, very briefly, Justin Trudeau's liberal minority government had a bunch of money that they wanted to get to students. How do we distribute this money to students was their conundrum. Well, we could look for a third party to distribute the money to hardworking students who didn't get any of the other federal benefits because they didn't qualify. And that's what they did. All seemed good. They turned to the We Charity, who has a long history of working with students and setting up grant programs and seemingly had the infrastructure to do so. However, as it turns out, the owners of the We Charity, two twin brothers, I believe, were good friends with the Liberals. This started to cause some problems, draw some eyes, we'll say, and more dripped out that it was what should we call it? A no bid contract. They were given the contract right away with no other third party entities being eligible for this distribution scheme. Maybe scheme is probably the wrong language there,
No, I
but
think it's pretty
You
accurate
can
at
go
this
with
point.
scheme, yeah.
And then as more and more dripped out, it turned out that there was speaking fees that the prime minister's brother and wife and mother had been given for speaking at these charity events, these We Charity events, and more it just looked like, wow, rich people giving rich people a rich contract without considering anyone else. So, insider trading, whatever you want to call it, pretty standard in terms of corruption amongst the political elite and the rich classes of basically any Western democracy, I would say. But, people were outraged, none more so than Pierre Polivier, I think, of the conservative government. And we won't mention his sordid past of schemes involving wasted taxpayer money. We can save that for another time. But the We scandal, in the end, the students were the ones that were hurt. I don't know if they ever got their money because the whole program was canceled. But I'll go to you first, Scott. What did you think of the We scandal? Were you outraged? Was it something that would, you think push the needle for a lot of voters if there was an election upcoming? Or is it kind of, you know, unfortunate that this corruption exists, but kind of par for the course?
I mean, sadly, I do think it is a little bit par for the course, which is disappointing. I think the shine has very much come off Justin Trudeau and this Liberal government over the last several years with kind of various scandals and questionable decisions. And this simply is kind of one other drip in that slow drip of at least my confidence fading in them. But does it move the needle for me massively? I guess probably not, only because as we'll probably get into, the alternatives are also so disorganized or bad that it would seem hard for a we'd almost need a much bigger scandal before I'm going to start thinking about O'Toole and the Conservatives or Singh and the NDP as serious contenders to replace the government. I think Justin Trudeau did really luck out with the timing of all this. That if you're going to have a massive scandal like this, probably do it mid-pandemic when everyone is focused on other things, and you could say, "Listen, should we really be talking about this?" Or, there's a virus and we need to save lives, and in the midst of a bit of a popularity bump. So I think that really mitigated things for him. I also think if you're going to have a big scandal, do it when you're just to the north of Donald Trump, because it seems we get so much American news. And this would be like one of 12 scandals that would come out on a Wednesday for the Trump administration. So it almost seems to me as if Canadians with our steady American news diet get a bit of scandal fatigue. And, you hear in the States about, it'd be like Trump gives $1 billion of relief money to some friend of his for his yacht club or something. And you're like, oh, what is this? The numbers here, we're talking Canada, it's tens of thousands of dollars here, there in speaking fees. I mean, I think it is outrageous. And I would like this Liberal Party more. And then they just seem to want to prove themselves to be somewhat inept and somewhat corrupt, but not inept or corrupt enough to make me really start looking at the alternatives.
It is unfortunate. It does. I resonate with that. It's like, I want to like you. Please, please do better.
Yeah.
Um, I think it also speaks to, like I said, the ineptitude of this. There was easy ways to get around this. The prime minister could have recused himself from the decision making process of who gets this money. They could have, even if the decision was going to be made already that we was going to get it, they could have ran a sham process. So it kind of speaks to that. Like, I feel like Harper would have never let this shit happen. He probably would have done something similar, but he never would have let anyone find out about it. Coleman, what's your take on the whole we?
Well, I just think, like you say, they were looking for a way to get students money during a pandemic. And as far as the federal government's concerned, they have no mechanism for delivering large amounts of money to the Canadian populace quickly and efficiently. Like, I can't remember a single moment in Canadian history where there's been some sort of like big hit to the economy and many people were out of jobs and they needed to disperse money quickly and efficiently to the people of Canada. So I understand why they went with a fucking charity of all things to get this out with.
For the people obviously that are just listening to this, you can't see Coleman dusting off his CERB check, his
Yeah, yeah, that's the
his
other.
rapid relief money that was given to him by the
as a
federal
proud
government.
as a proud recipient of CERB, I'm just like, let's give these guys a chance to explain themselves. I think to go, I agree with Scott. I think, and to make this point much more stupid than what Scott said, I think the Liberal Party of Canada is like this person you're dating, and once or twice a year they do something pretty shitty. Like, you start texting them on a Friday night and they don't get back to you, and then they just show up Sunday morning and you're like, where were you, what did you do? And then they come up with this great apology and this great romantic gesture,
They
like,
have great
sir,
hair.
great hair, and they just like bring you back in the fold. You know what? And you're like, you know what, every once in a while they might act up, but they do a pretty good job.
And
And
they
it's
kind
like,
of subtly remind you how terrible your ex was. They're like, well,
yeah, you
remember?
remember
Remember?
Harper?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
remember you remember how horrible things were? You remember how the grocery stores ran out of bread all the time? You remember how bad things were under Harper? And as they do this all the time, and agreeing with Scott, it's like, who the fuck else are we going to put in power in this country? Really?
Well,
Which
that's
almost
okay.
seems to be the problem, in that maybe that's if you're the Liberal Party, you think you can get away with these sorts of things because you're thinking, yeah, well, who else are they going to vote for as
Nah.
long as.
And to be fair to them, like, I thought they lost the moral high. What was the last? I can't even remember what the last scandal was that got me to not vote for them in the last election because like I
Blackface?
do.
Was it
Hmm?
blackface? Could be blackface.
I don't think it was. I think he lost me. Actually, no.
I wasn't
No, you know what
outraged by
did it?
that.
It was proportional. They lost me right away with the proportional or the electoral reform thing. They just
Electoral
bailed on
reform, yeah.
that. They lost me on that. So I was like, whatever. So I voted NDP, I think, in the last election, which is like
It
basically
was,
throwing it.
yeah, throwing your vote away. Yes, yeah.
So it, but I'm like, these guys don't. They've done a pretty good job handling this pandemic, as far as like keeping things going. Like they've put us horribly in debt, but like what's horrible debt these days? Like I'm here to tell you, it's not that bad. It's
Isn't
something you
that
could
part of
get.
just being a millennial? Like we're all just at
Yeah,
crippling debt. That's what you deal with.
I also
I
think
got high hopes for my late 30s. High hopes, but
there's a bit of an economic argument, I think, from some economists I've read that it's like people complain we're just kicking this debt can down to our children, but then our children can just kick it to their children and they'll kick it to their children until eventually we have robots to just pull wealth out of the air and then we'll all just live in paradise. That's my hope
and also
anyway.
I can make the brave choice to end my bloodline with me.
Yeah.
There will be no one to accept Coleman's part of the debt.
This is the last Lionel Steele to ever pay debt.
Yeah, you will bury me in the cold, dead ground, debt free.
It is actually a conspiracy of the 3.5 billion women on the planet to stop Coleman's bloodline, in its tracks right now.
They're doing a good job. They're doing a pretty good job. I'm not gonna lie to you.
There are no women in the background of Coleman's shot, you will note.
No, that Serb check hasn't brought in the throngs of fans, adoring fans.
It's tough.
Jokes aside, I think this is like it's really kind of depressing that is the state, and to me that's a pretty accurate description of like I really don't see of the NDP is gone. I mean, I don't know what they're doing. I don't think they have any money to run an election
That's why
campaign.
we bash the NDP when we get to the throne speech. I like how they handled that, but go on.
Okay, sure. But well, that is then the next big topic that happened over the summer was the Conservatives electing a new leader, and this would be my we can, if you want to touch on the response to the Conservative response to the WE scandal, we can. But I think we've kind of covered it in that it's shitty. It's not something I wouldn't be surprised that if any government in Canada did it. I mean, look to the Alberta government, and similar to worse things are happening there. Um,
Well, I
but
think the Conservatives don't. Let's go back to like pandemic thing one more time. I'm not going to interrupt you anymore. That's a lie. I'm going to interrupt you all the time. I should be hosting this podcast. The Conservatives, they don't want to be in power during a pandemic. It's bad for their look because they would have to bring Serb in. They'd have to spend all this money, and then it makes
Yeah.
them even harder to run. They usually run hypocritically on their small government promise federally,
Yeah.
but they don't want to manage during a pandemic. It's very
Yeah.
expensive. You have to do a lot of federal government stuff. They don't want to do that.
Yeah, you have to blow up the deficit or just let people starve in the streets.
Yeah, and they won't do that because they can't get elected. They are the perfect opposition that they can just cherry pick and say that these guys are dicks. Please don't give us any responsibility.
Yeah, look what they did to the debt. They totally screwed this up. Well, okay. Well, then let's talk about the election of the new Conservative leader, Erin O'Toole. He beat Peter MacKay, and I'm blanking on the other woman's name.
Leslyn Lewis.
Leslyn Lewis. Thank you.
In
A
the
lot of
news
people
recently.
Right. I have her article about a socialist revolution happening in Canada saved. I have not read it yet.
There's some bold claims in that one.
It is bold and makes me a bit sad, for this was supposed to be kind of a rising star in the future of the Conservative Party. And, for those who maybe wouldn't know at home, she recently wrote an op-ed, I think, in the National Post,
Yeah.
basically claiming that Justin Trudeau is currently essentially enacting a socialist coup in Canada based on things like COVID restrictions put in place by conservative provincial governments, which doesn't really follow, but I don't think that's been a
Also,
great concern for her.
How does the ruling government perform a coup? That doesn't make any sense.
Are they cooing themselves?
Like We got in on the inside. We put a man in power, and that's how we knew we could be in power.
It's not
Yeah.
a military coup, it's a prime ministerial coup where the
Hmm.
prime minister takes over the powers of government.
Well, we
Every
all
time.
know how much Justin Trudeau likes to dress up, so he could just be the new guy, you know? "Hey, Justin, is that you in a costume?" "No, no, it was a coup.
No.
I'm a socialist now." Okay, that's great. I haven't read the article, so please don't give me too many spoilers. But she was, yeah, considered a strong candidate in this. It's unfortunate that she's gone kind of the crazy route. It does show you that some of the stuff that happens in the U.S. is creeping into politics around the world. Canada's no exception. With that, let's get to the leader, the current guy, Erin O'Toole. He's the one that won. Frankly, I don't know much about him. I don't care for some of his "Make Canada Great" style rhetoric. It's not. I'm not a fan of that message. The "Take Canada Back," that kind of stuff. I do think he's already better than Andrew Scheer. I think he's got more credentials. Seems like a more capable leader. What have you guys seen of him so far? I think he's going to be a much more challenging opponent for Justin Trudeau. But let's go with Scott, your reaction to him as the leader, and then maybe what you thought of his reaction. Well, no, we'll save that because we haven't touched on the throne speech yet. What do you just quick thoughts on Aaron O'Toole?
Um, I think you're right, Aaron. Aaron O'Toole is a stronger leader than Andrew Scheer, which might be damning with faint praise because it's a low bar for sure. I do think a lot of the messaging still doesn't make any sense to me in that it seems they are really still trying to message to like oil and gas workers in big trucks in Alberta with "fuck Trudeau" stickers on them.
Hmm.
Um, and I think those people are already voting for you.
Yeah.
And a lot of their messaging about, you know, still we are very anti-carbon tax, that sort of thing is still seems to be preaching to the choir. So it's a much Aaron O'Toole seems to be a little more slick presentation to me, but I'm not sure the ideas or their kind of pitch to voters has changed much, which is surprising to me. I would think as a party they would want to kind of tack a little more to the center, especially with the Liberals going, further left. So I honestly don't think it changes that much for the Conservatives until they sort of change their overall strategy and messaging. It's just going to be in a maybe somewhat more slick but more bald package.
He is bald. Yes, he is bald.
He is
uh,
also younger than Justin Trudeau, which if you see a
What?
picture of them side by side,
What?
yeah,
There's
real deal.
no way.
There
whoa,
is
whoa,
no
whoa!
way.
We need
Look,
record scratch effects going on right here. What?
yeah, he.
40. Okay,
It's
Aaron
funny.
O'Toole's 47.
Aaron O'Toole is
Trudeau.
47. I believe Trudeau is 48.
Holy shit, he's right. It's close, but he's right.
I
What?
would have I would have pegged O'Toole at 56.
I would have put him 15 years older than Trudeau, but
Yeah. Aaron
Wow.
O'Toole looks like the Canadian Bill Dauterive from King of the Hill fame.
Uh,
Wow, that's
I don't know
shocking.
what that if that says something more about O'Toole or that damn Trudeau and his hair.
it's
Oh,
really aged phenomenally.
Yeah.
the way Canadian voters treat conservative scandals in this country, it's like if people find out that Aaron O'Toole is younger than Justin Trudeau, this will be a scandal. It'll be like,
Yeah.
how dare you not come out with how young you are?
Yeah. Uh, well, Coleman, what do you think of O'Toole? I mean, I agree with a lot of what Scott said. Until the platform changes, I don't think they're. I don't see why they're not focusing on the votes in Ontario and Quebec that are so important for re-election. But let's give them some time, I guess. What do you make of O'Toole?
Um, like everyone, I think going into the leadership race, it was just assumed that Peter MacKay was going to win. I think the Conservative Party assumed that Peter MacKay was going to win. And I think we shouldn't be surprised because looking back, because every conservative leadership race seems to spit out like the third choice candidate. It's just kind
Hmm.
of what they do, the second or third choice.
It's the ranked
Um,
balloting system. I've listened to
yeah,
many podcast, political podcast, talking about how this is basically what happened. This is how Scheer won too.
yeah, it's exactly how Scheer won. And like I say, like O'Toole seems at least somewhat like Andrew Scheer was like the gluten-free Wonder Bread loaf of a leader. I think I've said that before, but it's like the perfect way to describe him. There's just
Yeah.
nothing there.
Yeah.
And like literally nothing. Because like at least Trudeau is charismatic. There's like not an ounce of morality in his body, but at least he's charismatic.
Yeah.
Like Andrew Scheer is just like devoid of like
Personality,
yeah. It's
original
He's
like
thought.
also doughy, so I would say the bread thing really works.
oh
Sheer
he's doughy, but he's not fat. It's a weird thing. Like he's
Yeah.
not a fat man,
No, but he
but you're
looks squishy.
well, and he like when he tries to run on that, it was like it was always the thing that Stephen Harper struggled with when he like whenever Stephen Harper tried to play a cowboy,
Yeah.
and you put him in the Western clothes at Stampede and stuff like that, and you're like, man, it's just not working. It's not
Yeah.
working at all. And
Too
they did it with
awkward.
Andrew Scheer. Where like Erin O'Toole at least looks like the ideal conservative man, evidently a much younger man than we anticipated. Honestly, I'm honestly rattled by that, hearing that he's 47 years old. Because
Uh,
I think I'm looking into the future as like I think I might look like that at 47 years old at this rate I'm carrying on.
Whoa, 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 whoa!
Um
You'd have to accomplish a lot more.
There's still
Because
hope for me.
let's not take away Mr. O'Toole's accomplishments, which I think is part of, one of the reasons that he was a strong candidate. He has military background, then went to law school, worked in corporate law for a while. So I mean, he's compared to Andrew Shear's maybe being an insurance broker, maybe,
Not
I
quite.
think
possibly.
he poured the coffee and answered the phones at the insurance brokerage. So,
Mhm.
Right, right.
but that
Let's
will definitely, I think, play better with conservatives and probably people in the center. The fact that O'Toole does have experience, whether or not career politician should be a pejorative, it certainly is for a lot of people. And O'Toole having, a corporate background, I think will sell him better than Shear, who,
Well, especially to
kind
fiscal
of,
conservative types in
yeah.
Toronto area.
Well, I think the big thing with O'Toole right now is I've seen just his like recent speeches that he's like pushing hard on the fact that he doesn't feel entitled to lead like Trudeau does, which goes back to when they try to run against Harper against Trudeau about how Trudeau feels entitled to be prime minister because he's like the son of a former prime minister, and that didn't work then, and it's not going to work now. It's like
No.
he doesn't feel entitled to be prime minister. He is prime minister. Don't run on that. Run on just keep hammering him on these like many scandals. That's your only chance.
Well, many
And
scandals, and I think that they have to propose a viable, well, we talked about this after the election, a viable climate change plan, something that voters can understand and get behind and say, yes, this is going to work. But then in doing so, they're tasked with, because they've done this hard push for no carbon tax, and, the only party that's going to stand up for the energy workers in the West, they're kind of boxing themselves into a position. I feel like it's similar to Jason Kenney in Alberta that ran on the platform of I will bring jobs back with this giant tax cut for corporations and that will fix it. That's going to do it. And it didn't,
well,
hasn't.
you
And
you
now
can't
there's nowhere else to go. So I feel like the federal conservatives, unless they change their platform, they're going to be in the same spot.
well federally you can't run a conservative candidate for prime minister on like catering to Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba voters at all. Maybe I guess Manitoba kind of goes NDP sometimes, but like Alberta and Saskatchewan, those votes aren't going anywhere. So
Yeah.
don't spend a second of your time talking about what you're going to do for Alberta because first of all, you don't have to do anything for us. We'll vote for you anyway. Stephen Harper pointed that out.
And there's
So like
limited things that the federal government could do. Well, I mean, we could point to all the things that the Liberal government has done for Alberta, and it's
no,
still
it's
not
like
enough.
well, it's the whole thing with Alberta is like do more for us, and then they do something for us. It's like respect our power as a province. Don't trample on us. We're like that shitty cat that your friend has, and you go to pet the cat, and the cat like gets close to you, and then you go to touch it, and then it bites your hand. So it's like I wanted you to touch me with your eyes. That's what Alberta wants. We want the federal government to help us, but don't you dare fucking help us.
Yeah.
And
Help
like
us,
so
but don't make it so obvious that you're helping us.
yeah, we don't need any help except for like once every 4 years when we absolutely crater, and have like no jobs at all in the province.
Okay, well then let's move to the throne speech because this kind of ties into this because this was a bit of the bizarre, not bizarre, but reaction from the federal conservative party was the claims of the speech didn't do enough for energy sector, and it was, they still haven't solved this divisive, national unity problem, when it appears to me that they're the only ones driving the wedge in the unity problem. Well, and Quebec's always there to hammer a couple nails into that coffin. But the throne speech was, so Justin Trudeau prorogued Parliament, which may or may not be another controversial move for some people, and started the new parliamentary session a couple weeks ago with a throne speech laying out the government's priorities. It was kind of being telegraphed, it seemed to me. You guys are over there on the ground, so you could maybe give me more of a sense of it. But in what I was reading, it was kind of getting telegraphed that it was going to be something huge and bold, like UBI or something like this, some big problems or some big proposals. In the end, it wasn't that bold, and it kind of trotted out a number of things that the things that got a lot of play in the media anyway were the things that the Liberal Party has been saying for years and never really got done: a pharmaceutical program, a national pharmaceutical program, and national child care program were the big ones that stuck out. A lot of talk about a green recovery, and they just announced this week, I think, $10 billion in infrastructure going to green projects. um, Stoli, Scott, what did you think of the throne speech? Were you surprised? What did you like? And then conservative reaction to it. What do you think? Did they do enough?
I think I was wondering if they were kind of throwing out some trial balloons, because you're right, there was a lot of talk that this was going to have big transformational stuff. UBI was often mentioned, and I was super curious to see if that was something they were actually going to come out with. And I don't know if they were just kind of leaking this stuff to the media to try and gauge reaction and float whether that would fly with the public. Um, Overall, I would say I liked, as the parent of two small children, I certainly like the talk of a national childcare program, but I feel like we've been talking about that probably since I was a kid. So it's easier to throw a few lines in the speech. And same with the pharmacare, that until we actually, see a real plan and dollars committed, it just seems a bit like more fluff to me at this point. Um, it also seems to me there's such a disconnect between what the federal government is doing with respect to Alberta specifically and the messaging from Alberta conservatives around it. Because if you ask a lot of conservatives in Alberta, and I think provincially and federally, the parties really try and help to contribute to this attitude, is that Justin Trudeau is just throwing up roadblocks left, right, and center, and doing everything he can to destroy the energy industry. Um, and then you point things out like the pipeline was in trouble, so they bought the pipeline and are now, you know, it is under construction in part because the federal government bought it. They gave billions of dollars to clean up the orphan wells that Alberta decided not to implement the regulatory sort of framework that would have had them clean, the companies clean them up back in the day. It seems like the government has done a lot. Um, there wasn't much I think it makes sense from the government's perspective to not have a lot of mention of the oil and gas sector in the throne speech, because while you are doing these things, I'm not sure how popular that's going to be in Ontario and Quebec to really be stressing how much you're doing for Alberta, because I certainly think there's a somewhat deserved sense of Schadenfreude from the rest of Canada as far as
Hmm.
Alberta's financial troubles. When you've been the richest guy in town forever and all of a sudden you're having a little trouble making the rent,
And kind of a
it's
dick about
tough
it too.
yeah, and kind of a dick about it the whole time. It is tough to get sympathy, and so I can see how they don't really scream from the heavens, "This is what we're doing to save poor Alberta," who was not poor, 2 weeks ago, and
And
now
still has like higher income and lower taxes than any other province.
yeah, it's also amazing that if you listen to Kenny and certain people, like, this is just a hellscape of economic ruin, but we still have the highest incomes in Canada. It's really it's not that bad. There is bread on the shelves, I can, everywhere I look, people are still driving around. So Alberta economy, at least from my little bubble, is not nearly as bad as some make it out to be.
The unemployment and the continuing unemployment is a big issue. I mean, it's easy to say for, I mean, a lot of people, the coronavirus thing, a lot of people are unemployed right now because of that, but there's going to be a lot of unemployment pains due to the decline of the oil and gas sector. It is weird that they just continue to not recognize the elephant in the room and refuse to make any kind of effort to deal with that problem in a meaningful way, other than blame federal government for this. It's mind-boggling. Um, the throne speech did mention oil and gas, and that energy is a important sector moving forward. So I know that the president of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers did highlight that as a one of the three things that they wanted to see in the speech. They were not so impressed with some of the other aspects of it, but they were mentioned. So
Yeah, it's not like
it's
they
not like they didn't,
completely.
it's not like
Yeah,
they were totally ignored. I think if you looked at some of the headlines or some of the lines from the Conservative Party speeches, you would think that they basically, either didn't mention them at all or specifically mentioned that you're on your own, which was definitely not the case. Um, Coleman, any thoughts on anything that we've just touched on? Throne speech.
I think, well, talking about Alberta's response, it's like they didn't call out it's just, that's just what Jason Kenney does, is he just throws stuff back on the federal government all the time because he's hurting right now in his polling numbers, and that's just all he knows how to do. Um, Touching on UBI specifically, I would imagine it was considered. I think they're saving that for an election run
Hmm.
because they've kind of proven that they could do it. I'm pretty sure they've like ran the models and it can work. And like,
Well, and
why
it's
waste?
been added to one of the top priorities of the upcoming caucus meeting retreat or something
Yeah,
like this. So it's on the platform to be debated.
just just knowing the way that the liberal government operates, why waste that on a throne speech? Because first of all, they got to get through the throne speech, they got to get through a budget that they're coming up soon, and
Hmm.
then eventually they're going to get voted down. And they're going to have to do an election. And why politically? Why blow your wad, as we talked about in the group chat? Why blow your wad on a throne speech when you can save UBI for an election campaign?
Unless you wanted to blow your wad on the throne speech so that you could last longer during the campaign.
That's what I did before this. Like we talked about this, is I yelled my loud hot takes off my patio so I could have a nice long sustained talk during this podcast. I also masturbated right before, but that's away from the point. But I think UBI is really interesting because like the NDP and the Green Party can say in an election campaign, it's like, we're going to bring UBI in, and it doesn't mean anything because they're not going to get elected. The
Hmm.
Liberals can say we're going to bring UBI in, and it means something because
They might do it.
they could get elected.
Yeah.
And I think UBI is a little different than like their electoral reform promise. It's kind of wishy-washy. It's like, that's a big one. That's like when they're going to talk about legalizing marijuana going into the first Trudeau election.
I was going to say it was like the weed play.
Yeah, it's like, that's something you can't break. And I think they've proven that the federal government can do it. And there's a lot of arguments in favor of the program, and there's no way the Conservatives can counter it at all. I
Hmm.
don't know what a like an Erin O'Toole argument is against it. So it's like, don't bring it up. You can get the NDP support in this throne speech easily enough because, like I said before, I think the NDP played this well. They pushed the Liberals to make CERB benefits, to extend CERB benefits past this month, which I think the Liberals were going to do anyway, but they just wanted to give the NDP something to negotiate so they could support, because the NDP will never
Gave
have
them a
more power.
victory. Yeah.
Well, and they can't get a result in an election that gives them more power than they do now.
Well, they might have.
No, well, like, no, because they're polling at like 17% right
No,
now.
I know. I'm
It's
saying, but I
very
mean, they
consistent.
did it once.
They did it once, but they took the Liberals like crumbling.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
liberals had to go to third party status, and the NDP were the opposition with a conservative majority. I don't think there's any math out there that gets the conservatives a minority government and like the NDP any sort of like power over them.
Mm-hmm.
This is about as good as the NDP can hope for federally. Why would they want an election right now? Like we can talk about like ethic or like, morally they should really push for an election right now because the liberals have fucked up, which is true. But like, why would you push for an election right now if you're Jagmeet Singh?
Yeah, if
Well,
you're ultimately kind of playing kingmaker in a minority parliament, then of course that I can see your point. That might be about as good as they can hope for in the near term. So if this is as much power as you're going to get, then why push for an election and instead try and use your power that to
Yeah, when
push for
I'm pretty
things like UBI or extending CERB benefits or whatever it is.
well, I'm pretty sure like I just have this feeling that the liberals are holding this UBI thing in their back pocket because it's going to be like socialized medicine in Canada as like far as going forward. It's going to be like
mm-hmm.
a like huge platform of like their party going forward. Why waste it on a throne speech when you got a bunch of these other things to go through when you can pull it out in an election? And if you're the NDP, why oppose this throne speech? You have nothing to gain from it. And from the conservatives, it's like why make that big of a deal about it? You just need to get through this. You don't want to put Erin O'Toole into an election campaign right now because he's just been leader. He's been leader for like he just put out his throne speech response like the other day because he had COVID and was gone for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So like this guy, it's like he's just starting this job, and like it would be horrible to throw him directly into an election campaign. We just need to like a year or so revisit this again and then kind of get to politics as usual. Because having an election right now is not really good for any party, not even the liberals, because like who knows what happens.
No, and I think it's possible that the voters could punish the party that triggered the election by being like, "We're in the middle of a pandemic. Why are you making us go to the polls?" And
Yeah.
we'll see what happens in British Columbia because the British Columbia NDP are doing just that. But that's another topic. I'm interested with the NDP because it doesn't, to me, Jagmeet Singh is a non-factor as when it comes to a leader. Like I don't see anything from him, and I don't know, maybe it's media bias or whatever, but there just doesn't seem to be anything strong coming out of the NDP.
Well, his
And
thing, he surprised me because I thought he campaigned very well in the last election, and I
hmm,
thought it was going to pay off, and it really didn't. So I don't know if that's an NDP thing or a Jagmeet thing, or maybe I was just paying too close attention to the election and like saw too much of his stuff. But I agree with you. It's like he should have moved the needle more than he did. He
Well,
really
I
did.
think
mhm.
I think his campaigning was quite effective because if you look at the prognostications from early on in the election cycle, it seemed like the NDP were going to get completely wiped out. And then so the fact that they managed to simply not get completely wiped out, I
But was
think
that also a blackface bump?
it could also the classic BB blackface bump that
Hmm.
obviously that's maybe Singh talked to Trudeau 15 years ago, got him to take those yearbook photos and is all
Yeah.
cleverly ployed to but you're right, I think that's a bit of luck, but also I think he was an effective campaigner, but that basically just saved them from ruin. It wasn't going to they were
Hmm.
not in a position where they were going to get propelled into, opposition status or even being a serious player
Yeah.
in parliament.
Well, and the NDPs, they're very much at mercy of the Quebec vote, which is very random. And because Quebec, when they have a
Fickle.
protest vote, yeah, their protest vote goes to the bloc most of the time. And sometimes it goes to the NDP, like that one election that they got. It was kind of like in Alberta when the NDP took over. No one saw it coming.
Hmm.
It's like they were doing the same thing in Quebec when they were like electing people that didn't think they were going to win elections. And all of a sudden, boom, you're an MP now.
Yeah.
Um, it's and you, Quebec just weird that way. Like I don't even really know how they vote. Quebec's like this like walled off part of Canada where like what they're going to do on election day, like English speaking Canada, we don't really know. There's people that pay attention to it, but like all of a sudden it's like the block's back. We thought they were dead.
Never count out the
Yeah,
block.
Never count like they reanimated the block.
Yeah.
The block's a thing again.
Yeah.
and
Are
I
we
guess
gonna?
we're not used to it out west because I think out west things are so politically static for so long that it just seems insane to have this part of the country where people just vote for different people when they're not happy with the people they voted for last time. Whereas here, our strategy seems to be to bitch constantly about how we didn't get the results we wanted, try and gloss over the fact that it was the people we voted for that didn't deliver those results, and then we'll just vote for them again and hope that maybe next time they'll really listen to us. So
Yeah.
it seems baffling to us that Quebecers would just vote for different people when they don't get what they want.
Well, it's Alberta. Alberta specifically, we had that one protest vote where we voted the NDP in with a massive majority government, and then we immediately yelled at them for not being experienced enough in governing.
Yeah.
It's like look at these guys. They don't know what they're doing.
It's
It's like
like
yeah, we
somebody
put
elected them for the first time in 40 years.
yeah, it's like you replaced that party that was an entrenched bureaucracy for 40 straight years. It's like you don't even know what you're doing. Not one of you has any experience in the provincial government. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, it's a tough one. You know what I learned about Quebec not too long ago from an Italian fella here in Europe that lived in Quebec for a long time? A lot of them don't celebrate Canada Day.
Yeah, because they feel very. I could see that
I
because they
mean, I
feel
wasn't
very.
surprised, but I kind of was like, really? And he was like, yeah, it's usually because it's like on the 1st of July. So it's usually, it's the end of a month, beginning of a new month when people are shifting apartments. You got to be out. So he's like, most people just call it moving day, and they get an extra day to like try and move their shit, out of the
Oh, really?
apartment. Yeah.
I don't accept that because I celebrate Canada Day very vigorously. I always get drunk at a baseball game. It's fantastic. I once
Well,
skipped
you
a wedding.
celebrate
I had
Canada
a
Day very vigorously by watching America's game.
exactly. Drink nine. Me and my friends get together. We drink 9 beers and 9 innings at a baseball game. It's called a complete game. It's catching on. Look it up. Um, but I once turned down an invitation to a wedding because it was going to be on July 1st. I was like, I cannot attend this. I will not. And if someone asked me to help them move on July 1st, I'd be like, absolutely not.
Well,
This.
apparently there's a holiday 2 or 3 weeks later, or maybe it's before, I can't remember. Um, a French holiday that is in
Saint Jean
Quebec.
Baptiste, I think.
Saint Jean de Baptiste. Yeah, yeah, that's the one.
Because they also don't it's not I don't believe Victoria Day, the May long weekend, is an official holiday in Quebec, which makes more sense to me that a big celebration of the Queen is maybe not gonna be, super popular amongst our French-speaking cousins there.
Yeah.
But I remember I was cranky because one year I was in Quebec for Victoria Day, didn't get the day off, and then was back in Alberta for Saint Jean Baptiste, which is I think their replacement holiday.
Yeah.
So I got screwed out of a holiday. You owe me one, Justin Trudeau. Make it up to me. Um,
Classic
but
Albertan.
I didn't realize that Canada
He's
Day
not gonna
wasn't
do
really.
that.
Yeah.
Well, does Quebec, did they celebrate a holiday at that time that we made incredible strides to accommodate them in our largely English speaking country and then still somehow played the victim afterwards? I love Quebec because Quebec is so much better at being Alberta than Alberta is.
It's
So much better.
we could do a whole show on this, that it's like Alberta and Quebec, it's like a rom-com, the will they, won't they. It's like you guys should just be together.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
so similar in so many ways, and yet you hate
Mm.
each other.
And then, and it's like, they're like, okay, so like I'm a football fan, and it's like I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, and we hate the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers don't give a shit about the Vikings. They're like, whatever. They have other rivals in other divisions because they make the playoffs and they go deep. We hate them. They don't even think about us. And then that's Quebec is the Packers and Alberta is the Vikings. Like we hate Quebec. They don't spare a second thought about us.
Yeah.
We don't even impact them on any level
Yeah.
because they've got everything so streamlined in how they affect things federally. They don't care about us.
Yeah, and it just enrages us evermore. Okay, we've gone off the rails here now in our talking about Quebec, but let's just be clear. We all love Quebec. They're great. Don't want you to leave.
Yeah.
Country wouldn't be the same without you. We have to now move to the news, the big news. Municipal elections in Alberta coming up next year. No,
Hmm.
of course not. Uh, how are you guys feeling with things with things going on in the US? It's
I'm
dominating
gonna
the news everywhere. The border is still closed, which is good. I think if there's one thing that can unite Canadians right now, it's keep that motherfucker closed. I don't know
Yeah.
which one of you wants to start.
I'm just gonna do a health check on Trump to see if he's still alive right now.
Okay,
Just give me a second.
while Coleman checks the Twitter, Scott, I don't know where you want to. I don't. Okay, he's alive. We're getting the
He's
thumbs up.
still alive. He's alive.
Allegedly, because how much can we really trust the press coverage, the press releases coming out of this White House? Scott, I'll let you start. I don't know where you start. The election,
Uh,
Trump's now sickness. What do we do? What's going on here?
yeah, let's start what I was thinking before we found out about all the Trump COVID news. It seems to me you look at so much of what is happening in the United States right now, and if it was happening in an Eastern European country, we would absolutely just say, the political science student in me would say, oh, yeah, there's a democratic country that looks to be backsliding into authoritarianism.
Yeah.
There is just one thing after the other. The convention speech from the White House, where it's all the official kind of imagery of government, is now being used as part of this reelection campaign. It's almost this "I am the state" thing out of Trump,
Mm-hmm.
that celebrating this whole celebration of the cult of personality, and they're putting his name in fireworks, and this is all the sort of stuff I would expect from like Viktor Orban in Hungary.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then all of the actions they've taken to essentially cheat in the election, which I think has been a trend that's been ongoing for quite some time. I think the Republican Party has wisely realized they are the minority party in terms of what people like. So rather than sort of shifting their views to kind of meet the electorate, they're just trying to shift the electorate to meet them. So disenfranchising people. I mean, they're messing up the mail systems to make it so that Democrats are less likely to vote.
The gerrymandering
All
thing
of
has been going on
Yeah,
for years,
gerrymandering is
purging voter rolls.
insane.
Yeah.
Um, and I look at all that stuff, and I think if you just switch the headlines to say Poland, people would say, "Oh yeah, there's definitely kind of backsliding." And I think part of the problem is there is definitely this "that could never happen here" attitude. Um, so people sort of have this impression, like, yeah, if it was happening in Poland, it would look like backsliding. But we are America. We are a shining city on a hill, and our democracy is just a granted and it's given.
Our
And I
institutions are strong, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah, our institutions are strong, and it has lasted forever. We are God's chosen nation, and we will go on forever, no matter what. Um, and it seems that that sort of thinking has led people to just overlook how glaringly corrupt so much of what is going on with this election is. And I've like certainly read in places, and I've said to people, and people kind of have given me a look like you're a bit crazy, but I think it's not crazy to suggest this could legitimately be the last truly free and fair election in the United States. Like, I don't think it's probably not going to go that way. And Trump is probably not going to win, especially with the news from the last few days. But
He's probably not going to breathe unassisted again.
yeah. So
That's gonna
it's
age
on.
very badly.
Yeah, I
I am
know.
I am legitimately very worried for our American neighbors and their democracy and their system of government, because it seems Trump has been allowed to run roughshod over so many norms and institutions, especially
Well, and
coming
the Justice
around the
Department.
election.
Look
Yeah,
what they've
like
done with the
the stuff the
Justice
Justice
Department.
Department's doing. It's all banana republic stuff that if Trump wins another term, then I think he's like, the gloves are off. Like, if you thought the gloves were off before, there is
Yeah,
nothing that he wouldn't do,
and it's a
and it
validation
seems
of what
nothing the Republican Party would condemn him for. Like, it is, you're starting to think he wasn't kidding if he shot someone on Fifth Ave. They would say, well,
he is the
shooting
president.
is
We can't
he is the
indict a sitting
president.
president.
Yeah, Can we say the guy didn't? What was the guy wearing when he got shot? Like,
He was asking for
media.
it.
Yeah, media is always rushing to blame Trump and doesn't even ask the hard questions. So I don't know. I think it's a really scary time for American democracy. Um, on the flip side, it certainly looks like he's going to lose. And I have also said this to people, and people also give me a look like, you really think he's going to lose? Like, what about last time? Polls are worthless. Nothing means anything. Trump is an unstoppable force. And I think the polls really were, it was more of an issue of misinterpretation than them being wildly off last time. I think last time people just had this idea in their head that there's just absolutely no way Donald Trump could become president. So even as election day approached and the polls were looking kind of tight, everyone just interpreted it in the most pro Hillary way because it was just understood that there's no way this guy could be elected. Whereas now it seems to have gone the other way. That people are just like,
Don't
after
take
what
any
happened last
chances.
time, there's no way he can lose, or he's probably going to win. And it's like, but it says like Joe Biden's up 9 points nationally and in all the swing states, and we're like, oh, that doesn't mean anything. He's definitely going. Trump's definitely going to win.
Well, I
So,
think people underestimate how hated Hillary Clinton was, and part of that was Trump and his, messaging and stuff. But like, people did not like her, for whatever reason, justified or not. There was a lot of I don't think people can muster as much dislike for Joe Biden. But anyway, Coleman, I'll let you jump in, before we touch on his sickness and what that means for this whole thing. What were you thinking before that news? Are you as alarmed, we'll say, at what's going on in the US?
Um, I'm not as alarmed because, like, if you look back to the way the U.S. has operated in other countries, specifically while the Republican Party was in power, like they do this stuff to other countries' elections all the time. It's not really a surprise that they would do it to themselves.
but I
Like,
don't
it's
think
not a
anyone
surprise.
looks at
Like, I
that.
say that like dead serious. Like the shit that they pull in other countries. It's like, why would you think it's such a moral jump to do that to your own country? It
But it would
doesn't
be
really
bad
surprise me.
if you're saying, well, elections in Iraq are like this all the time. So what's the big deal? It's like, well, that seems bad. That seems like a
Well, elections in
not,
America have been like that for a while. Do you
yeah.
remember how George Bush got elected the first time? And the reason why the Republicans were able to do that because it was like razor close. Where this election, it isn't going to be close at this point. Because if you look at like 538's great because they have like this election model that kind of gave Trump a very good chance in the last election because people in the states look at national polling and national polling is useless in their system. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean anything. It's national polling in our system is like useless as well because it gives the conservatives a huge bump in the western provinces because they run up the score in Alberta. But it doesn't mean anything. You only get one. If you win one seat in Alberta by 80% of the popular vote, it's still one seat. It doesn't make a difference. If you win Montana by 80%, it's only one or like how many electoral votes. And like California is the same way.
Yeah.
So, but if you look at the actual swing states themselves, it's like Trump has to make up significant ground in a lot of swing states, and he's in the hospital right now. And they can only steal an election if it's close, and it doesn't look close at all.
Well,
Because like 538 has like Trump and has Biden at like an 80% chance of winning the election, but that model has it built in like the time left that Trump has time to turn things around. But even like Nate Silver's the editor, I've followed 538 a lot. I think they do really good work.
they are great. Yeah.
Um, like he said, like if the election was held today, or like it was like today was a few days ago. It was before I think it was before the debate actually, which didn't help Trump at all. But he had a 9% chance of winning under their model if the election was like held that day, which is like he's not coming back from that, and it was not going to be close enough that they can steal this one. And the other
No.
thing in the states is if they do steal this election, there's a lot of people that don't have jobs and a lot of people that are very mad right now, and they're throwing around the term general strike right now a lot, which means like the economy, and we've seen how the American economy reacts to being shut down even slightly, the heaven and earth that they'll move to get that going again. And if Donald Trump the herpes strain of presidents tries to shut down or steal the presidency and results in the economy being shut down, do you think like the
The herpes
CEOs of
will
these
flare up.
multi yeah, do you think the CEOs of these multi-billion-dollar companies are going to tolerate having this easily transferable crabs of a president affect their balance sheets? No way.
Well,
No
this
way.
brings up a couple well, interesting points, we'll say. What would it take for him to quote steal the election, right? Like, because he's already forecasting to a segment of the population, which is his base, and some of which is armed and acknowledging the fact that they're ready to do violence. Um, and saying that if we lose, it's because it's rigged. Like he's been messaging this for a long time now. And so the scenario doesn't even necessarily have to be that we got more votes and we stole it because we manipulated the system in order to get more votes. The story is just it gets to, midnight, they're still counting votes. Some places are still close and he just says, "Well, you know what? We have our internal numbers and they're showing that we won and like I've said all along, it could only be lost if it was rigged, and so we're claiming victory." And he claims victory early and puts chaos into the system, and you have motivated people that support him in the streets. Like that could breed such chaos. I mean, I don't know what the end game is there. um he was openly talking about, we need to get a Supreme Court judge in there that's favorable to me so that if this goes to the courts, they'll back me. He
Yeah,
said
but
that in an interview. But
it can only go to the courts if it's close.
right, but look at what they've done with it. Like, not, I'm just saying I wouldn't put it past anything to happen with this because of what he's done with the Justice Department, William Barr. And I mean, again, you're right. We're right in saying that there's no logical way that they could do any of this. But if he claims victory early and is stubborn and steadfast in that and cries foul and all of that stuff and has people in the streets backing him, I mean, I don't know what that means, people in the streets backing him, because it would be a minority of people. It wouldn't be probably anywhere close to the protests that we saw for racial injustice and all that stuff. But is it enough to sow enough chaos that, I don't know, then what's the next step? Because I think that's about as far as he thinks about these things, or his party is thinking about these things, is, well, if we
I
can
think
get
you're
to
giving him
there,
too
what
I think you're
next?
giving him too much credit as like as far as he thinks ahead. He doesn't think ahead at all. Like this is all the
No,
Republican
he
Party
doesn't think
themselves.
ahead. But someone like Bill Barr, definitely, like Bill Barr is smart, is just as evil, but much, much
He's
smarter than Donald Trump.
he's
I
smart, but if
think
you're gonna go all in on a dictator, like you're gonna say if you're gonna like in some sort of model, you're gonna bring a dictator in the U.S. Are you gonna go all in on this half-eaten Big Mac on the side of the goddamn road president that Donald Trump is?
Yes.
Like there's no.
yeah, I
He's
think
old.
if
He's
you're
weak. You're going on a
if
like a
you're Bill
Tom
Barr,
Cotton type.
you go to war with the wannabe dictator you got, not the wannabe dictator you want.
No, it's the
Trump,
Republican Party. The system's slanted in their favor. They can wait a couple elections and try this again. This problem isn't going away, but Donald Trump is not the guy you go all
I
in on.
think he
I
is the
You
think
want
guy
to
because of
there
his bluster and because of he's willing to do it. He's willing to buck all those norms and he feels no shame. Stoli, let, let's get you in
I
here.
think so. The concern is that's kind of been widely reported, but 'cause you say the only way he can steal it is if it's close. But what if it looks close on election night? Because you see the splits of who's requesting mail-in votes, and it's 3-1, 4-1 Democrats over Republicans. It seems, by all accounts, far more Republicans proportionally will be voting in person on election day, and far more Democrats are going to be voting mail in. There are also many states with Republican legislatures are fighting against any measures to try and count the mail in votes earlier. There are certain states that were pushing to have the processing part done before election night. So when they do the signature verifications and all that stuff, so then all you have to do is open count the ballots. They're fighting against all that because they want to drag it out as long as
Right,
possible,
right,
knowing that the mail-in vote is going to be proportionally Democratic. I think in the hopes of being able to make the case that Trump is leading in the votes that have been counted on election night, even if you can reasonably foresee that he will get crushed in the mail-in vote and overall he's not going to win. But if you can use that time to try and go to the courts and say, there's rampant fraud and all the ballots for me are in a river somewhere, but I can't tell you which river or where it is, but all sorts of legal shenanigans that they will, I think, absolutely will try and pull to say these votes are invalid.
Yeah.
There's hanging chads, the postmarks aren't right. They'll say virtually anything. And it's still, I think it's still a bit far fetched. They would have to convince probably a lot of judges to throw out a lot of votes, because it certainly does look like Trump is going to lose by a lot of votes. It will also probably be harder for him to orchestrate these kinds of things if he's on a ventilator and can't talk. But
But we've also just said that like
but
he's not the guy orchestrating these things.
yeah, it's
So they
true.
could
But he's
weekend
the
at
guy.
Bernie's him.
But he's the yeah they could. He's the face of the operation though, and he already looks like he's a dead body that's being puppeted just because the way he looks.
He
My whole
also, I think the writing is on the wall for Trump that he is in so much legal jeopardy, if he
Yeah.
loses the protection of being president,
He's a
that
cornered
oh yeah,
animal.
cornered rat,
Yeah.
absolutely. That I think from his perspective, there is absolutely nothing he wouldn't do as an absolute sociopathic narcissist in order to try and hold on to power, to avoid both the like personal shame and embarrassment of having lost, especially lost to Joe Biden, a guy he spent, a year and a half saying is this senile shell of a man. I think it would kill his ego, and it's going to kill his freedom when the tax fraud stuff seems pretty cut and dry. There is Lord knows how many other skeletons are in the closet, how much stuff is going to come out from his time in the administration. Um, I think they're going to need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to be perfectly honest, when all of this is done, for how all of the corruption and how much money got stolen and all this sort of stuff. But I think he's got nothing to lose.
By going all
I
in.
mean,
Yeah.
he's got, yeah, by going all in, because he's got everything to lose if he doesn't win this election.
Yeah. That's yeah, I agree. What do we think though? Like, and this was another thing that comes up, and people will say, "Oh, that's alarmist. That could never happen." This, that. But I have been, I'd listen to people much smarter than I am on podcasts. I'll shout out one, the Strategist podcast. You should check that out. And the word civil war gets bandied about, and people still put like, well, okay, maybe it's only 10% chance or whatever, but I've never before heard that, about a country, and a country, well, a country like the US, and a country that is the most armed country out there, and that has seen large acts of domestic terrorism, uh, Oklahoma City bombing, things like this. If Trump loses, you could also see that situation, or Trump stubbornly tries to hang on to power, you could see that situation. What does that look like? I've gamed some scenarios in my head, trying to be like, well, what happens if he does do that? At what point does the military step in? I read something, it's kind of old now, but it was updated. It was in the Walrus, Canadian publication, the Walrus, um, talking about this back in 2018, and they updated the article. And I think the polling data at that time, which obviously is bound to have changed, was looking at the military and just this situation. And even their military is divided at this point in time. This was in 2018. I don't see it getting any better, but it was like 40% of the regular class, the infantry class, or whatever you want to call it, the non-officer um, group supports the Trump, and only 30% of the officer class would support Trump. So it's weird. It's really, really weird to be talking about this kind of stuff. Like you said, Scott, if it was South America, if it's Eastern Europe, you're like, well, that's kind of the shit that happens there. Do you think there's a chance for violence? And what would that look like? Is Canada ready to take all the refugees streaming up to the border, Coleman?
It's I think we would. We're a very caring country, first of all. We take care of our less fortunate like myself. I think you guys are really downplaying how much money corporations in America make with this machine that they have built right now, and why they would let Donald Trump throw a wrench into that operation.
Hmm.
I think like just because like he's a wild
But
card
what power do they
in
have
the
to influence the?
what power does like the money in America have? Like they're financing Donald Trump's campaign right now. Like that's the only thing keeping him afloat is he's stealing money from his own campaign to keep his personal
No,
finances
but
afloat. What happens when that money
in
goes
the
away?
event that he stubbornly, decides to just say it's all fake and I'm staying in power, right? That happens. You get violence on the streets. You get maybe it's not full blown, like conflict like you would see in the Middle East or something, but you see sporadic acts of violence, whether it's shootings, bombings, whatever, shit like this, and it starts going haywire. What is Jeff Bezos going to do? What is Elon Musk going to do? What is the Koch brothers going to do? What are they going to do? I mean, they could
Are you
pressure
talking
Trump.
about like talking about if there's violence on American streets? There's already violence on American streets.
I'm
There's been
saying
violence on
more
American
violence.
streets for more violence. Oh no. What if there's more gun violence in America? What are they possibly going to do?
It's certainly
Like,
hard to imagine a scenario with a full-blown civil war, which is not to say it can't happen, just that I can't picture what this would look like simply because if it's essentially a civil war of pro-Trump versus anti-Trump forces, I've got some strong intuitions as to who has all the guns,
Mm.
and it's not going to go well for the, you know, Biden-loving peaceniks who are in no way prepared to fight a civil war. Not that I don't think it would go that way in terms of organized battles or street fights for the control of the streets of Portland or something like that. But certainly acts of violence, I could easily see, say, if we're in a scenario where it looks like Trump has lost. He's on Twitter 6 times a day talking about how it's rigged, and Fox News is running constant stories of, some tiny voter fraud discovered in Wisconsin and one guy in a basement. And now, so maybe the whole election's just rigged. I imagine in that scenario, I can easily see you've got mass gatherings of anti-Trump people, protesting in the streets to say we want to make it clear, we want the world to know that we think Biden won. Could you see, the Proud Boys or Oath Keepers or any of these dorky named
The Boogaloo Boys.
militia groups? Yeah, the Boogaloos. Maybe the Boogaloos look.
mm,
Could some of those guys say decide to show up at these rallies to keep the peace and then
Shoot people.
yeah, and then shots start getting fired. And what does that do for, what does that do for national unity? What does the country look like after that sort of thing? I mean, I guess I wasn't obviously alive in 1968, and it's kind of crazy to me when I read about just say the sheer number of bombings that were happening in the United States at the time. It was like it was like a bombing somewhere every single day, and somehow they kept it together, and you know
That
they
was
pulled through it, and
also,
now here they are.
again, the article I was reading in the Walrus. I think it was this article. They were talking about this, but they were like, look at that time. Some of the most radical groups in the country were the Weathermen and Black Panthers, and I think they mentioned a few others. And the maximum number of people that they could sort of estimate that were in those groups was maybe like 10,000, something like that. There's like an estimated 300,000 people that are subscribed to, militia groups, right wing militia groups, Boogaloo Boys, Proud Boys, all this stuff kind of combined. And I know these numbers are kind of nebulous because you're trying to track online groups and different groups, and they all have kind of different, ideologies and stuff. They do all kind of lean this one way, but it's much different. It's much bigger. It's a much larger segment of the population.
I think you guys are. I don't know. I'm gonna bring it. This podcast doesn't have a lot of conflicting arguments, but I'm gonna bring one here. I think you guys are greatly underestimating the elite of the U.S.'s commitment to keeping the status quo.
That's true.
If we're looking at a human life cost of keeping the status quo in the U.S., that number is about at 200,000 right now. Probably more,
We
like
have a measure.
207,000. Yeah, we have like a human measure of what they're willing to do to keep TGI Fridays open. and what like to keep Long John Silver's open.
But right, so then
Like there's no
what is their mechanism? I agree with you. I agree with you, Coleman. I agree with you on that. What is their mechanism to get Trump to leave, though? They just say we're not like they can say we're not supporting you anymore. They can say we're not giving you any money, but he's in the chair. He's got the
they
phone
have
feeding.
the Constitution allows them like he loses power after the inauguration date. Like he's not in power anymore. He can sit in the house if he wants. It sounds like the Secret Service hates him because they got most of them like infected with COVID right now. They go in and pull him out.
Yeah,
And if he doesn't let them take over, then the leader of the house, because like after the election,
but
there's a drop dead day
you don't have a lot of
when like
Republicans supporting that idea right now. They're not coming
Yeah, I
out and
think
saying it.
they want to get their Supreme Court justice in. Once they get that Court justice in, then it's fine.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't think I think you guys are like Donald Trump was like they hated Donald Trump before. He's been a useful tool until this point. He already lost them the House. He's probably going to lose them the Senate.
Yeah.
And we like I remember when George Bush was in power, there was a lot of talk with civil war and stuff like that. All this stuff was going to happen. The US makes so much money right now. It's just like a machine that powers forward. It's a shitty machine that fucks over its own people all the time. It's barely a democracy. The other thing about the US, and they're like, we're a democracy. We allow choice. We're not
Argue.
like a country like China where you can only choose from one party. We allow you to choose from two. So it's like, what the fuck is really the difference if like the Democrats in power or the Republican? You get a choice of two people.
I agree with you, Coleman, and I think you're right in a sense that maybe I'm not saying that any of the things that we talked about are going to happen. I'm interested in the fact that it's for the first time ever, even if it's a small possibility, is a possibility in my lifetime anyway. Because like God, like you said, the '60s there was a moment of turmoil there too.
Well, there's been turmoil already.
Yeah.
And like, did anything really happen from that? They changed the Aunt Jemima bottle. They didn't give him anything else. The U.S. has an incredible ability to withstand turmoil and then go back to like just the way it was.
to just exploiting the workers. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess part of me thinks, Chicken Little says the sky is falling and then the sky doesn't fall until it does.
Right.
And you can make a lot of money betting against Chicken Little every time. But then, I mean, is this the time? Probably not. But is it a 1 in a billion chance that things go seriously awry in America? I would say it's definitely higher than that. And I think part of the problem is almost like we lack the imagination. Just no one in our lifetimes ever really been in a situation where there are, two guys legitimately saying, I'm the president elect of the United States, and they both have big followings agreeing with them. Like so much of democracy is just based on norms and people's sort of acceptance of the situation.
And the good
Like
faith of
Trump
the
is president
opposition, which
because
the
yeah,
Republican
there's
Party has shown none of it.
Well, they've never shown like good faith. I think there's more money for Donald Trump specifically to claim it that he's the uncrowned president of the U.S. from his own shitty cable news network somewhere. So he can spew on every like Thursday night, owning this little network. That seems to be, they've bought shares in that One American News
Yeah.
Network.
But if he
he'll
goes
And
do
there
to
seems to be
7 nights a
jail,
more.
week also. Yeah, if he
Hmm?
goes to jail, then he probably
Oh,
doesn't get to do his hits.
Richard Nixon should have went to jail. How did that turn out?
he wasn't as hated.
Yeah.
He was
He
pretty
was pretty
hated.
hated, but I think
I think if you guys are looking for justice for a rich white man in the US, you've come to the wrong goddamn place. It's just not going to happen. When it comes time to prosecute Donald Trump, they're going to be like, in the interest of national unity, we've decided to let this pass.
Yeah. We'll
Like,
we'll let him move to
and that's
Russia.
assuming he lives through this goddamn thing. Which, by the way, if you are in the Trump administration and your only goddamn job is to keep this one old fat orange man from getting COVID-19 and you have all the tools and resources of the US government to keep that from happening, how the fuck do you fail so badly? And not only do you let him get COVID, the top of like everyone the who's who of the Republican Party is getting COVID-19. Chris Christie got COVID-19. You think that guy's not at risk for? Like,
I
I
think you.
think
he had, that guy he has a front butt. Chris
but
Christie has a prominent front butt. That is horrible for COVID. People with front butts do not do well when they
Stats
have
show.
COVID-19.
That's just science.
Oh,
Scott,
yeah.
what are you
I
saying?
think what you're saying is, how could it, with all these resources, and it's like saying we have the world's leading horse leaders to water in the world. So how on earth could that horse not be drinking? And it's like, well, because the horse is a moron and belligerently refuses. You can
Yeah,
have
yeah.
all of the
Yeah.
best plans, the best people, the best intentions. At the end of the day, that horse just wants to jam its head in a bucket full of COVID, and there's nothing you can do or say that will, that will stop him.
Which I want to point out, I come from a family, we had horses like my entire childhood, and I don't like that saying for one reason, is like horses fucking love water. They love water. If you take, like, especially on a hot day, if you take a horse to water, it will drink the shit out of that water. It's like, that's just how stupid Trump is. Like,
Yeah.
horses know that they need water to survive. And this fucking administration, if only there was a thin piece of fabric that you could put over someone's mouth that greatly reduced the chances of transmitting this stupid thing.
And yeah, I think you're underestimating how difficult it must be to get Trump to take his fucking vitamins, to get Trump to eat his vegetables, to get Trump to go to bed at a recent hour and not watch Fox News all night. All of these things that could help one have a healthy immune system and resist the pandemic that's going on. Could you imagine what it'd
Well,
be
there was
like to have to tell him that he can't do the rallies? Like that lasted for, maybe a couple months.
he went and did a rally on
Yeah.
Thursday, a small, I guess, a fundraiser, but he totally had it.
Yeah.
He totally had it. The timeline says that he had it, and they knew that he had it, and he still went there.
So I guess this
Because
is
he's a toddler and he won't listen.
we're not saying anything that people probably don't already know. This is the question then. What do we You're talking about the timeline, Coleman. There's a lot of, and I haven't seen a lot of the stuff, a lot of the big stuff that happens, minute by minute. I'm asleep when these things go on, and I just catch the highlights in the morning. W- What is the situation that you're getting, like the sense of what's going on with his health? And it just seems like, how can we even know anything? The the White House isn't going to tell us the truth. The media wants to spin this a million different ways. I think, Scott, you made the joke before the podcast started that news is in a horrible inflation or deflation cycle right now.
Hyperinflation of news.
Hyperinflation, that's the one.
They're printing way too much news right
Yeah.
now. It's too much everywhere.
Yeah. So I guess we'll see. I mean, but does this even really affect the election? I mean, I've heard all the things being like, well, he's gonna, if he survives, he comes out saying, well, see, I told you it wasn't that bad. There you go. Uh, or he survives and said, hey, they gave me hydroxychloroquine. Everybody go out and buy that. Like, and if he dies,
I
what
think
is it? What is it? What does it mean? Then it's just, well, the cabal of liberal Democrats fucking gave him COVID and killed him on purpose, assassinated our guy.
I'm calling it right now. That they're gonna, well, because they have him tweeting again, but it's like, it really looks like someone that's like tweeting on his behalf
Yeah.
to make it seem like, but they're gonna like build up this story about how he's gonna try and bring the country together, and it's like we all need to come together to support him. He might even get a little bit of a bump from it, but that fucking guy, if he gets out of this, the first time he's in front of a microphone, he's gonna say something so profoundly stupid that he's gonna lose all the benefit. Like, he's gonna show up and he's going to blame Somali immigrants for giving him COVID or something like that. And he's going to lose all the benefits that he got from this
Or
thing.
even worse, because I mean, he's shown that immigrants are a scapegoatable population in the U.S. He's gonna burn, like you said, like the CIA or the military or something, or blame it on the nurses that didn't give him good enough pillows or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Scott, what do you see coming out of all this? Because Boris
I
Johnson did get a
honestly,
bump
yeah,
from when he got it early on in the pandemic.
Actually,
yeah.
that bump was before.
Yeah,
I saw a chart
I'd
about
read
that. It
that
was before.
he
Okay.
was already kind of getting the pandemic bump. I think the in my humble opinion, the best thing that could probably happen for the United States is Trump gets really sick, but doesn't die, but gets sick enough and it becomes public that it's undeniable, like to his own base, I think would convince a lot of people this is real,
Ooh, I
and
think you
would maybe
underestimate the
encourage.
base.
It's true. But hopefully there might be something that if your leader could be taken down by this, then it could happen to any of us. I think you're right. If he gets a real mild case and recovers, then it's absolutely going to be like, see, it's just the flu. So why, no one's going to care. And if he dies, it's going to be a million conspiracy theories and, it'll just be absolute chaos. It doesn't even seem the US has clear rules about, say, if he were to win the election but then die before inauguration day. It's not the same as if just automatically Pence becomes president. There's some, it gets very messy. um, but I think he probably will get really sick. Already, it seems to be that he is not doing super well. They had a press conference today where they're very misleading and kind of not saying much. And generally, like, they spent 4 years lying about everything. So it's impossible to really get a good sense of what's true and what's not here. But I think if he was actually just feeling pretty much fine and had the sniffles, they would say that he would be on Twitter. There would be videos. The fact that it's Twitter silence, and Coleman, you're right. It's clear these tweets are being written by like a Trump Twitter impersonator. Um,
The
it's not
spelling's too
actually
good, the
him.
grammar, the full
Yeah,
sentences.
yeah.
Well, it
And it's still like
it
random capitalization and stuff. Like they're really trying to go for the accent, but
well, the
it's
spelling
not
was like
quite
it
on.
was too good at the start, but then they just changed because he's been tweeting a couple times like while we've been recording this, and it's clear that like they've picked up on the criticism and they've changed it to try and copy it. Like it's that obvious.
But I don't think he gets any bump at all, honestly,
Yeah.
simply because he's been so belligerent about downplaying the epidemic or pandemic that I think virtually everyone was thinking, well, that's chickens coming home to roost. No one's thinking, poor him. He did everything he could to fight this virus, and still it came for him. It seems like he really did his best to get the virus, and then he did, and now he's getting what he deserves. I don't think a lot of people are going to feel a ton of sympathy or certainly think the man who couldn't protect himself from COVID should be leading the country through the next phase of the pandemic. I don't think there's no way this helps him politically at all, in my view.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I
I'm
mean,
gonna
I think he has his base that will vote for him. He has those people. This is, we'll wrap things up here as we go. But we could have done a whole show on QAnon and the, and the QAnon
Oh
phenomenon.
yeah.
So those people are going to vote for him. There will be people that votes for him. It will be interesting to see. I mean, obviously, you don't want anyone to die. I was talking about this with a friend last night. It's like I don't want anyone to die. I don't want to wish death upon anyone. But it's hard to have sympathy for someone that's conducted themselves in the way that he has, in the position that he has, and then, like you said, chickens coming home to roost. Um, yeah, I don't. It's if I think if you're right, Scott, that the best case scenario would be a brush with death and then
Yeah.
coming back. Coleman, I agree with you that any sort of gain that he might get the minute he gets in front of a microphone is just going to be lost. But it's not going to be lost on that core group of people that are voting for him. So I'm not going to say never. I'll never say never, but I'll, Coleman, if you want to wrap up anything that we've talked about in the last little bit, please do. And then we'll go to Scott. If you want to pump your Instagram accounts, please do.
Mm-hmm. It's one more Trump point. I find it hilarious that this is the man that wants to take away any semblance of government supplied healthcare for the people of America right now. And it was pointed out on Twitter that one of the experimental drugs he's been given for his COVID case in one of the two facilities that he's been treated for, both the White House and the government-run hospital that he's currently at cost more than either of his $750 tax returns while he was president. This guy is a horrendous piece of shit. He's the fucking worst. And if you're I don't know how many American listeners you get, and I don't imagine any of them would be undecided at this point. It's like, if you are undecided at this point, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, what are you thinking? There's no possible, we have nothing new to learn about this guy. Nothing. There's no big surprise as far as Trump goes. So fuck him. You know what? I don't really care what happens to him. He's just a horrendous person. He's been hand in hand in the death of over 200,000 people in his country. I don't care what happens to him. I don't wish any ill will for him, but I don't particularly wish any goodwill towards him. Follow me at Lionel Steele.
Thank you, Coleman. Scott, you got any final thoughts?
I had seen a joke recently that someone said, in the future, historians of 2020 will focus on single days. You'd have some professor to say, my area of expertise is actually October 2nd, 2020. A little bit of spillover into the 3rd, but that's really honestly what it feels like right now, that the news is coming fast and crazy, and we are truly living in times that will get long sections in the history books. So it's interesting. I think I'm a little bit scared for our American cousins. I don't think this is going to be the collapse of America or anything, but things might get pretty ugly for a while. So I admit I have high hopes that we can do, a podcast in December or January and talk about how everything was kind of overblown and there was just an election and a guy won and they handed the papers and, that was that. I have high hopes, but somewhat low expectations that will be how it goes. So, yeah, I just want to say I am very, very curious to see how things play out. And maybe put your guns away, America, for a couple months would be great. And I don't really have Instagram, so just follow Brad instead.
Yeah, yeah, all right. Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of wraps it up. We wait and see. And maybe this is just the first step in the long decline of America, and we can talk about that next time. What did it take the Roman Empire to fall? 100 years. In today's time, what is that? 10 years. So who knows?
Yeah.
We'll see. Thanks, guys. Let me reiterate. This is the panel of very normal, average people with just our opinions and some university educations to go on. So
That's really going a long fucking way right now. I'm really proud of that university education.
Me too. Me too. Coleman, Scott, thanks guys for doing this. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah. Thanks, Brad. Really appreciate it.
Follow me at Lionel Steele.
There you have it. Again, many thanks to Scott and Coleman for joining. Steve, we'll catch you next time. Follow us at 2BradForYou, Instagram, Twitter, at BVanParadon. You can find me there as well. Leave us a comment wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and rate wherever you get your podcasts. Would really help us out. You can also go to the website at 2bradforyou.wordpress.com. There is a comment form there. So those are your ways to get in touch. We would love for you to get in touch. Drop us a message, a question, leave us a voice recording. Maybe we'll put it on the show. Maybe. No guarantees. Thank you all so much for listening. Stay safe, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
I'm Norwegian.
That explains it.
All right.
Leave it to a goddamn Norwegian to talk like that.
We'll save that for another podcast.
I say, yeah, this is all making the cut, right?